everyone! Today is the day of rejoicing, for it marks another educational milestone as we give due recognition to our junior high school completers who will finally unfold another chapter of their lives.
It is an honor to be part of this special event, which is the high point of the academic year, because today we celebrate virtually the accomplishments and the academic achievements of our grade 10 completers.
And to begin with, may we put ourselves into the spirit of patriotism as we listen to our national anthem and a prayer followed by regional hymn, Pangasinan hymn, and Pangasinan Division 2 hymn.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, kailas ng sinagalan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y buhay. Upang hinirang, tuyagan ang magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatak tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng pagkaw, ay hinatang tudla, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal, ang islang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na naghihingi, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin. Luman ang araw ng walhagin pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hindi kaya ng pagkay mag-amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Dear Heavenly Father, we gather here today to give thanks for all the blessings you continuously shower on each and every one of us. We lift to you our collective prayers. May our joint presence embed a sense of unity, strength, and camaraderie in our hearts. May we learn and selflessly share this knowledge to our colleagues, friends, and loved ones. All these we ask in the holy name of Jesus. Amen.
And the rivers, through the great and winding trails, to the shores where breezes linger. That's the place I love so well. It's the home of men who love her, men who died to keep us free, men who told no bad the weather, that we want will never be. Region 1, oh Region 1, there's no better place I see. Region 1, oh Region 1, dearest home by far to me. From her care I learn my lessons, in her veils I work and pray. She has kept me safe and happy as I live on day by day. Though to other lands I wander as I search for wealth and fame, in my heart I will remember Region 1, beloved name. Region 1, oh Region 1, there's no better place search for wealth and fame. In my heart I will remember Region 1, beloved name. Region 1! Sekatan dayungi Pangasinan yang binabi Dengan motan iariguas Diuragap ko lawas Dan pusong Pangasinan Agkanalingwanan Luyak ko yan ianagan Penegtakan yaman Mantuan nalikwas mula kaya nenggelam Kasih baluri mapulang Say pangkakasat tinatay nalilik na Labot ka na mabrisika Say dayang mundang na'y natuktan sa'y yaman Sedang nakawalan ngayon Karunantan samping mo Pangasinan Oriental lawas Bangayan Lawas takan itang duro Pangasinan Arun kakal bayukuan Anang apupong wala na bangunan Ikikinon kutsyopaman Pangasinan luyang minadyawan
Vast dim and rolling plains give life to the sturdy hands. Men, women, young and old find hope and glory in this fold. This home of great joy and gladness, of fertile lands and green valleys, nature that captures the eye and soul, oh bled the heart of doubt and peace. East to west, from north to south, faithful ones pack and gather at the pilgrim of the North, whispering a common prayer resounding. Mabuhay, mabuhay, Pangasinan to I sing mabuhay to you. Oh, men, women, young and old, find hope and glory in this fold. Oh, I sing mabuhay, Pangasinan too.
Our school's Division Superintendent, Dr. Danilo C. Sison.
Our Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Arlene B. Casipit and Dr. Wilfredo Sintaya.
To our Dynamic School Principal 3, Mr. Francisco B. Torres Jr., and to our Assistant School Principal 2, Mr. Jerry G. Grande.
To our two workaholic head teachers, Mrs. Bernardita Erese Rivera and Mrs. Charito del Campo Abisilia.
The teaching and non-teaching staff of Cabanbanan National High School.
To our Municipal Mayor, Honorable Kim Micael Amador, and to all LGU officials.
Punong Barangay Jimmy Aquino.
PTA officers and members,
Internal and external stakeholders.
parents and completers watching us via Facebook.
Mabuhay! Welcome to Cabanbanan National High School 4th Completion Ceremony for the school year 2020-2021 with the theme
Strengthening the quality of education amid COVID-19 pandemic. I am Mr. Geoffrey Saking.
and I am Dorialyn Natividad and we are the Masters of Ceremony. And to give her welcome address, let us welcome on screen Mrs. Charito del Campo Abisilia, our head teacher 3.
Followed by a special graduation message from our dynamic school principal 3, Mr. Francisco B. Torres Jr. and our punong barangay, Honorable Jimmy E. Aquino.
Our ever supportive principal, Francisco B. Torres Jr., Sir, workaholic faculty members who exerted their efforts for the good of our students, energetic parents who are always helping their children for the preparation and answering of their modules, students, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my honor and privilege given a chance to welcome everybody for this affair, a memorable moment for our students who tried their best to complete successfully their 4 years in their high school life. Though it is very hard to accomplish their modules, still they try their best with the guidance of their parents just to come up with a successful ending. In this is the time to enjoy their hardships. Students, congratulations and hope to see you successfully in your other journey to senior high school. On behalf of the Cabanbanan National High School faculty and staff, I am glad to welcome you all. Students, congratulations, congratulations, mabuhay and ganda tayo morning.
Challenges are often some of those precious gifts in life that help us build invaluable strength. Learning how to rise above these challenges enables us to grow in character, leading us to have a deeper sense of purpose. To know that difficult experiences like the COVID-19 pandemic is a part of what it means to be human and alive. Although dreadful, it gives us a chance to rise above such difficulty. We will never know how tough we could be without tough and trying times. The start of school year 2020-2021 was surely uncertain. There were no immediate protocols to follow. Education was dubious since there was a sudden change in the system, change in society, and changes in the way of living. But like a live organism, education has to evolve and adapt to the new normal. Moreover, be strengthened to thrive and live on amid the COVID-19 pandemic. We have mustered our courage to face problems and challenges, making us stronger, more resilient, and even unexpectedly creative. We have gained more in taking some risk than failing because we have not done anything. Happiness is reserved for those who want to face life as it comes and not for those who run away or quit when tough times strike. My dear graduates and completers, despite the no face-to-face education, the no classroom learning experience, the no co-curricular activities and competitions, and the presence of tedious and voluminous modules, finally, at the end of the school year, you can now safely say that I have completed the senior high school or the junior high school curriculum. For every success you have achieved, be grateful to all who have helped you. Be grateful to your family. In one way or another, they have helped you answer your modules, either through their guidance, facilitation, tutelage, or they themselves answered your modules for you to cope. Be grateful to your parents who untiringly took the risk to come to school weekly to claim your modules and submit your written works or outputs. Be thankful to your teachers. They made sure that each one of you had a complete set of modules weekly. They patiently downloaded, printed, corrected, and sorted the modules weekly. Not to mention checking your outputs, making follow-ups on unanswered modules, as well as conducting home visits, video calls, group chatting, text messaging, as well as messenger messaging, just to reach out for you. Be thankful to your alma mater. It did all it can possibly do to meet your needs. Be thankful to your division office. They have given all possible assistance, intervention to help out our school. Be thankful to our local government officials, the Sangguniang Kabataan, most especially our Mayor, Honorable Kim Michael G. Amador. He has greatly assisted the schools of Manaoag cope with the pandemic. But most especially, thank the Lord, because many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Lastly, here are my parting words to you, my dear graduates and completers. Number 1, in everything you do, put God first and He will direct you and crown your efforts with success. Commit to the Lord whatever you do and your plans will succeed. Number 2, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for men. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Happy people give their best in everything they do. Lastly, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose, activity under heaven. A time to study beyond high school and to study conscientiously. A time to graduate and graduate successfully. A time to work hard and work efficiently and effectively, and a time to have a wonderful life, and a time to share it with someone you love. Best wishes to all, and congratulations, Cabanbanan National High School graduates and completers of school year 2020-2021.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Ito po si Punong Barangay Jimmy Aquino ng Cabanbanan. Ako po ay lubos na bumabati sa lahat ng magsisipagtapos ngayon sa senior high school dito sa Barangay Cabanbanan. Ako po ay nagagalak dahil sa gitna ng pandemya, nagawa po natin na itapos ang ating pag-aaral kahit may COVID po tayo. Sa akin po, sana ipagpatuloy po ninyo ang inyong pag-aaral dahil hindi lamang po ito ang inyong tinapos, dahil may susunod pa po na inyong kakaharapin. Sa ating mga magulang po, maraming salamat din po sa inyo, lalo na sa pagtuturo nyo sa mga module. Alam ko po yan, minsan kayo po yung sumasagot ng module nila. Yung iba naglalaba, yung iba naglilinis, pero ganun pa rin, parang bumabalik yung alaala natin noong high school. Nalalaman po natin yung mga ibang ginagawa ng mga estudyante. Kumbaga, nanay mo na nga, tatay mo na nga, classmate mo pa. So, muli ako'y nagpapasalamat sa inyo at bumabati ng happy graduation. At sa mga fourth completion and graduation ceremony na pinamumunuan at binabati ko sina Danilo Season, School Division Superintendent, Francisco Torres Jr., ang ating principal, Jerry Grande, ang ating assistant school principal, Madam Bernadette Rivera, Charito Abisilia, mga head teacher, po, binabati ko rin po. At sa lahat po ng mga teachers sa Barangay Cabanbanan, National High School, faculties, mga members ng faculties, parents, at sa lahat po ng mga tumutulong para mairaos ang graduation na ito. Lubos na nagpapasalamat, Punong Barangay Jimmy Aquino. God bless us all.
Sir, I have the honor to present to you 129 strong candidates for completion, composed of 63 males and 69 females who have satisfactorily completed the requirements of K-12 curriculum. Your acceptance and confirmation.
By virtue of the powers vested in me by our Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Danilo C. Season, SESO 5, through my appointment and designation as School Head of Cabanbanan National High School, and by Republic Act 9155, I warmly accept and confirm you completers of the junior high school curriculum of Cabanbanan National High School, school year 2020-2021. Your certificates gives you the right and privilege to be promoted to the senior high school. Congratulations!
And to introduce the guest of honor and speaker, let us welcome on screen Mr. Julius Perry P. Tadeo.
To our Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Danilo C. Season, Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Arlene B. Casipit and Dr. Wilfredo Sindayan. To our Dynamic School Principal, Mr. Francisco B. Torres Jr. and Assistant School Principal 2, Mr. Jerry G. Grande. To Workaholic Head Teachers, Mrs. Bernardita E. Rivera and Mrs. Charito Abisilia. The teaching and non-teaching staff of Cabanbanan National High School. To our Municipal Mayor, Honorable King Micael de Guzman Amador, and all LGU officials. Punong Barangay, Honorable Jimmy E. Aquino, Parents, Teachers Association officers and members, our internal and external stakeholders, parents, completers and graduates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is both an honor and privilege to introduce our guest of honor and speaker for today. This might be quite challenging, but to think that he was a man of virtue and simplicity, I feel so elated to introduce him to everyone today. If one takes a closer look at the alchemy of the achieving person, two distinct virtues pop up: perseverance and hard work. This man finished his bachelor's degree in secondary education, major in English, at St. Camillus College of Manaoag, and a recipient of Governor Espino's Leadership Excellence Award. Later on, he completed his Master's of Arts in Education, major in Communication Arts at Pangasinan State University, Urdaneta City Campus, and is currently taking up Doctor of Education, major in Educational Management at Urdaneta City University, where he also serves as a part-time instructor. Moreover, he also recently finished courses in Southeast Asian Institute of Educational Training Incorporated, and at the moment, he is the SIC coordinator, SGO, and school paper advisor in their school, coaching in division and regional schools press conference. Our guest of honor and speaker today is a living idiom of a man who happened to be born at the right time and at the right place. Coupled with an impressive background, it is not a surprise that he became devoted public servant of the Department of Education. So much to say about him, and yet, after all, he became the person he was now because of the virtues and values that was developed and nurtured in him. And now, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, I feel very proud to present to you the alumnus of this institution and a junior high school teacher too of Baginay National High School, Manaoag, Pangasinan. Please help me welcome Sir Ariel M. Bambalan.
To our Secretary of Education, Leonor Magtulis Briones, our Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Danilo C. Sison, our OAC Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, Dr. Arlene B. Casipit, our Chief of Curriculum Implementation Division, Dr. Cornelio R. Aquino, the Chief of School Governance and Operation Division, Dr. Rosalino T. Agpalo, our very able principal of our beloved alma mater, Sir Francisco B. Torres Jr., our assistant principals, head teachers, teaching and non-teaching staff, parents, completers, graduates, and friends, good day. This year, graduation is a bit different from what we were used to do. We have to do it virtually, but we still feel the warmth as we celebrate the victory of education amid COVID-19 pandemic. The fact that we are physically separated does not prevent all of us from fulfilling the satisfaction and happiness for the path we have traveled. Pride in the work done, and for us to look with enthusiasm and optimism, with commitment to the challenges that lay ahead. To begin my talk, may I just share to you the poem I wrote during the enhanced community quarantine. It was entitled Ray of Light. I hope you will listen to my literary piece as I read it. Ray of light. I look at the horizon. Storm clouds loom. All of a sudden, the sanctuary turned gloom. The flowers stopped to bloom. I was terrified when the thunder boomed. Help! Help! I cried. No one helped me, so I hid. The place was totally empty white. Is there anybody here? I tried. The raindrops had fallen. I shivered. It felt like Halloween. This empty place I have never been. It was a ghastly den. The trembling fear I felt, like an ice cream slowly melt. When a tiny ray of light tilled, the dread crashed. Hope was built. I followed the ray of light, kept my strength to continue the fight, hoping to track the way right. There, I saw him in distance. I ran and embraced him tight. During the pandemic, I have realized that life has many to offer, and we tend to lose hope as we get into the process. We might be shrouded by our fear to conquer the things that interfere us to achieve what we want in life. But No matter what happened, we should always have the sulong attitude na kahit anong mangyari, we fight for our dreams. Because at the end of the day, you are the only one who can make things possible. Just like what we accomplish now, even we were restricted because of COVID-19 pandemic, we still managed to cope with its adversities. I also learned that you just need to find that ray of light when everything turns into darkness. It simply means that even if the possibility of your dreams to make this happen is at the lowest level, always give a try. You will never see how things if you don't give a try. So to our graduates, I challenge you to get off to your comfort zones and refrain from saying, okay na, hanggang dito na lang. Hindi na kaya, wala ng pera. Wow, hindi mo pa sinusubukan, sumuko ka na. These statements are all gasgas. My dear graduates, do not limit yourself to dream. There are many opportunities await as you wrap up your senior high school journey. If you don't have time or if you don't have money to finance your education, there are so many scholarship grants out there. It's just a matter of finding ways if you really want to succeed. I remember when I was in college, I only have 30 pesos in my pocket. And I spent that 30 pesos the whole day. 20 pesos for my fare back and forth and 10 pesos for my snacks. This is not to exaggerate, but Ma'am Rivera and Ma'am David, my college instructors before, knew it. Saan umabot ang 30 pesos? Umabot hanggang dito. As they say, anos labat. That time, I realized that determination was really a game changer. And you just need to believe that you can. Your commencement exercise today is a proof that nothing is impossible if we really exert our energy and effort in achieving our goals. To our completers, new chapter is about to begin, and it will be more challenging phase of your journey. This phase will test your decision-making skills as you will be deciding what path to take. You always follow the things that can develop you holistically. Know your interests because it will lead you to passion. Choose the track that really fits to what goals you want to achieve in life. Piliin kung ano yung makakapagpasaya sa'yo at kung anong makakatulong sa pag-abot ng iyong mga pangarap. Laging tandaan yan. Now, to continue, I would like to share a quote from Mark Twain that made me realize about life. He said, "The most important days of one's life is the day that you are born and the day that you find out why." This quote explains that shifts that we are presently undertaking as we go through the various phases of life. Today, as you graduate from high school, you are few steps away to unwrap the concealed message behind Mark Twain's words. I believe that someday you will fulfill your own purpose and potential as you go through to your chosen paths. Now, may I encourage our completers and graduates to go to the comment section of our virtual graduation Facebook Live and comment our hashtag. It's hashtag tuloy ang laban, hashtag para sa pangarap. Once again, I would like to encourage our completers and our graduates to comment our hashtag for today. It's hashtag tuloy ang laban and hashtag para sa pangarap. To our parents, you did a great job. The continuity of education despite the pandemic was not possible without you. continue to be the support system of our children. Our sincerest gratitude to our parents who have been served as the modulators, bondi clocks, and home innovators. To our graduates and completers, it is your time to express your gratitude to your parents and guardians. Why don't you give them a kiss and a hug? Again, I encourage our completers and graduates to express their gratitude to their parents and guardians by kissing and hugging them and by saying thank you. Thank you. To our teachers who work under abrupt educational transitions, it's a job well done. Let us continue our resilience to these challenging times and to intensify the DepEd's mantra, sulong edukalidad, even amid the pandemic. Once again, my warmest congratulations to our completers, graduates, parents, teachers, and administrators. Thank you so much, Cabanbanan National High School.
We now come to the highlight of this completion ceremony.
The presentation of our junior high school completers and the academic achievers.
For the school year 2020-2021.
I have the honor to present to you the completers of 10 de Guzman, Mrs. Mylene M. de Guzman, Advisor. Starting with Aquino Angelo D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Angel Aquino. Ferrer John Lester R. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Eduardo O. Catahom. Salinas Oliver Lyle M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jeros M. Salinas. Salinas Paulo M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jeros M. Salinas. Santillan Jonathan P. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jeffrey G. Calyanta. Tamondong John Ray A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldo F. Tamondong. Tubias Kelgin B. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Eugene Tubias. Valdez Rolly D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rodi D. Valdez. Viloria Justin P. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Romeo M. Viloria. Viloria Leonard B. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jaime V. Viloria. Canonigo Angelo R. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Onofre U. Canonigo. Garcia Charlene Lara M. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roland R. Garcia. Guillermo Rosemary G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldo L. Guillermo. Manila Gninya May L. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Fernando R. Manila. Mercado Glisel C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Oliver F. Agliam. Mitra Gemaline B. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jose A. Mitra. Nantes Glyza V. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Nardito C. Nantes. Nirona Maria Sweet Nicole S. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Antonio O. Nirona. Oratel Jessica L. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Simeon D. Oratel. Sajo Gail Ann Laurent Chi with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Norvin M. Sajo. Sabala Geraldine R. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roberto M. Sabala.
I have the honor to present to you the completers of 10 Salvahan, Mrs. Marian V. Salvahan, Advisor. Starting with Agbanlob Kurt Andre R. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Arnold D. Agbanlob. Aquino Jomar M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Joey T. Aquino. Aquino Vincent S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rodrigo T. Aquino. Benavides James Benedict M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ricky C. Benavides. Kababat John Rayner E. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Freddie M. Kababat Sr. Kalputura John Lloyd T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Perfecto G. Kalputura. Castañeda Mark Lester G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Michael C. Castañeda. Komisaryo Ace R. With honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Alex N. Komisaryo. Rivera Nicolas Vincent C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roberto R. De Vera. Delphine Ricaredo III M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ricaredo S. Delphine Jr. Esteves Romel C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rodelio G. Esteves. Galvez Jeremy T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldo J. Galvez. Galvez Renan N. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ronaldo T. Galvez. Ancheta Mariela May M. With honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Michael D. Ancheta. Kalimlim Alaysa M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ernest R. Kalimlim. Caspillan Ira V. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roland M. Caspillan. Caspillan Raja D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bernardo M. Caspillan. Castillo Mary Ann S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Galo O. Castillo. Castillo Rachel Ann V. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ronnie R. Castillo. Dakanay Shanilyn L. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldo L. Dakanay. Rivera Anika Sofia F. With honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Napoleon A. De Vera. Galiza Erica Luis T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Andring S. Galiza. Galvez Kyla Marie D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ferdinand V. Galvez.
I have the honor to present to you the completers of 10 Tadeo, Mr. Julius Perry P. Tadeo, Advisor, starting with Lalata John Ray V. Proud parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rufino N. Lalata Jr. Makaraog Mark Dave T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jeremy P. Makaraog. Magsino John Maynard B. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ruel V. Magsino. Marquez Mark Kenji T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald P. Marquez. Paramio Eugene B. Parent, Mrs. Fe B. Paramio. Kelisa Pierre Louis G. With honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sherwin Q. Kelisa. Sajo Chody Miguel Jr. A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Chody C. Sajo Sr. Salinas Raymond D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roberto V. Salinas. Tejada Mark P. Parent, Mr. and Mrs. Rami L. Tejada. Toreno Jervis Julio T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Alfredo G. Toreno. Viloria Jimboy R. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Florentino B. Viloria. Viloria John King L. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rogelio B. Viloria. Galvez Lovely B. Proud parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rodolfo G. Galvez. Galvez Nehemia Grace T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldo J. Galvez. Hipolito Janeline T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Irenio O. Hipolito. Inaldo Christine Fatima N. With honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bernard V. Inaldo. Maduro Esther Marie V. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Aldrin S. Maduro. Manuel Erica Maya S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Efren S. Manuel. Papalo Angeline B. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Eduardo G. Mapalo. Ochinang Casey A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert C. Ochinang. Fee Jemarie. Parent, Miss Jennifer G. C. Untalan Mary Rose G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Marlito D. Untalan. I have the honor to present to you the completers of 10 LACA, Mr. Ronaldo E. LACA, Advisor, starting with Bautista Mark Joseph G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rodrigo M. Bautista. Cagin John L. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Dominador C. Cagin. De Guzman Philip N. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Salvador M. De Guzman. De Guzman Ronald J. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rogelio F. De Guzman. Rivera John Ru S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Edwin M. De Vera. Amplio Christian C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carlito S. Amplio. Evangelista Kyle Stephen D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Efren C. Evangelista. Fabianes Angelo V. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. James G. Fabianes. Galvez John Mark D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Juanito L. Galvez. Andrada Patricia May M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Patricio D. Andrada. Banayat Miliana Danielle C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Danny Banayat. Banayat Rachel A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Renato V. Banayat. Bautista Mayumi T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lando V. Bautista. Bruce Jobelin L. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Joseph S. Bruce. Cabrera Generos G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jerry P. Cabrera. De la Cruz Daniela Crisanta T. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Mark Anthony F. De la Cruz. De Los Santos Realin M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. George M. De Los Santos. Amplio Jana P. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. James N. Amplio. Esteron Romelin A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Romel O. Esteron. Estrada Jenaline R. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Samuel C. Estrada. Galvez Hyacinth Angel P. With honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Virgilio E. Galvez.
I have the honor to present to you the completers of 10 Salon. Mrs. Mary Jane C. Salon, Advisor. Starting with Balot Rodnel A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Romando E. Balot. Banayat Jerome D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Virgilio V. Banayat. Kadungon John Paul N. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Noel B. Kadungon. De Guzman Hans Kenneth A. Parent, Miss Marilyn A. De Guzman. De Vera Mark Moen G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rodolfo V. De Vera. Evangelista Mark Lawrence Yu. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roderick G. Evangelista. Evangelista Raymond G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Salvador C. Evangelista. Gorospe Wendell S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. William E. Gorospe. Labao Geoffrey M. Parent, Mrs. Valerie M. Labao. Morales Jefferson P. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Joffren A. Morales. Asuncion Alia Dayan G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Alvi B. Asuncion. Asuncion Althea Joy G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Alvi B. Asuncion. Castillo Roname A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Mario A. Castillo. Comisario Olivia A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Willie D. Comisario. De Vera Rizalin C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Romeo B. De Vera Jr. De La Cruz Angela May M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ray V. De La Cruz. Egipto Julian S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jose R. Egipto. Empleo Rhea C. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carlito S. Empleo. Estacio Lovely A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ernesto L. Estacio. Evangelista Crystal Ann R. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ferdinand S. Evangelista. Galvez Lee B. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rodolfo G. Galvez. I have the honor to present to you the completers of 10 Colombino, Mrs. Madeline M. Colombino, advisor. Starting with Garcia Noel C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Samson P. Garcia. Guillermo R.J. G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldo L. Guillermo. Manawis James Cabizel. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Cesar C. Manawis. Obrador Jeronimo Jr. G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jeronimo C. Obrador. Orlando Emmanuel V. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Noel A. Orlando. Ramos Christian Dave C. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Federico B. Ramos. Tabarnilia Janelo E. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jimmy E. Tabarnilia. Tamundong Franco A. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Francis L. Tamundong. Valdez Mike Wilson. Parent, Miss Josephine E. Valdez. Bonifacio Hayan Christine M. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Nicolas M. Bonifacio. Garcia Rosario G. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Loreto C. Garcia. Gillig Jasmine Joy S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jerome O. Gillig. Laca Samantha Nicole D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Gabi B. Laca. Lalimarmo Drusel T. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Conrado S. Lalimarmo. Pangan Roxanne S. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Rinaldo P. Pangan. Peralta Glea Vanessa D. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jose S. Peralta. Poselero Syra A. with honors. Parents, Mrs. Perlinta A. Poselero. Sajo Irene V. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jomar C. Sajo. Tamundong Kathleen Joy N. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roberto D. Tamundong. Valdez Zanilin Tiffany M. with honors. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Isagani S. Valdez. Veloria Jocelyn P. Parents, Mr. and Mrs. Romeo M. Veloria.
Pledge of Loyalty. With all sincerity and humility, I do here pledge my loyalty to our home, Cabanbanan National High School. I promise to uphold all the ideals and values it has taught me. I will strive to be known as a person with purpose and meaning. In all my future dealings in life, I will do my best to face them with courage, faith, and dignity. With duties and responsibilities to respond to the needs of the world and my fellow human beings with initiative and creativity. I will uphold myself with honesty, be able to make independent choices, act responsibly, and respect the rights, opinions, and dignity of others. Behind this pledge is our never-ending love, appreciation, and loyalty to our alma mater, Cabanbanan National High School. So help me God.
May we take this opportunity to thank everyone who unselfishly cooperated and participated in today's Cabanbanan National High School virtual completion ceremony.
Winston Churchill once said, "Success is not final.
Failure is not fatal.
but it is the courage that counts. This has been Joffrey and Saki.
And Doriel y Natividad,
Congratulations, completers, and to your proud parents.
go forth, Uru, and be ready for the next chapter.